It's my pleasure to introduce Mendiola Barreto, who's the Enterprise Sales Manager at Texty O, and they're going to be taking us through the future of words, how words impact hiring and retention.
Hi. How's everybody doing? Yeah, good, fantastic. Well, my name is Mendiola Barreto, and today, for the person that said, woo, yes, thank you. Today, we're gonna talk about words. But before we do, we're gonna play a little bit of a game. How many of you, and for those of you who actually know me, you're not allowed to play in this, how many of you want to confidently guess how I identify? Hello? I was just leaving you with a dramatic pause. How many of you want to confidently guess how I identify? Any of my identities? No show of hands. The guessing game isn't that fun. Some of you, if I didn't introduce myself today, might think that I use she, her pronouns, but I don't. And already, some of you are thinking, oh, I know then. But there's alternatives that I could possibly use. And today, while I don't use she, her, I'm not really feeling he, him either, so I'm going to use they. For those of you who aren't familiar, they is the singular version of a gender-neutral pronoun. I am trans, I'm non-binary, and what that means is who I look like in my head is different than how people perceive me in the world. And most people, when you ask them that question, what do you look like in your head? They're like, I look like me. And I walk a little bit differently in the world because of it. In fact, as you heard, I said my last name, Mendiola Barreto. My mom is from Mexico, and my dad is from Puerto Rico, which means that my native tongue doesn't have much room for me because it's incredibly gendered. I walked all throughout my life not having the words to describe myself, not knowing, because Latinx was not a thing up until a few years ago. And I'll never forget the first time that I heard it. The first time that I heard that somebody was both Latinx and non-binary. I remember being like, wait, what? I've been missing out this entire time. And today, I'm going to talk to you about how that plays in the talent acquisition and recruiting world. I got a message on LinkedIn for a diversity and inclusion position at a major tech employer in Silicon Valley. And when I got to the interview, it was on site. There were some people that were dialing in remotely, right, because they were in other offices and locations. But the recruiter had asked me for my legal name. Now, at the time that I was interviewing for this role, my name wasn't legally Audi. And for trans people, we oftentimes refer it as our dead name. And the reason why it's called our dead name is because it comes with so much emotional baggage about who we were and how long it took to get us to this point. It comes with all of these emotional experiences of having to come out to our family, possibly getting alienated, ending up homeless. And that actually goes up statistically if you're a person of color. Now, I started the interview process, and each person would sit down and say, hey, and then would use my legal or dead name, of which I then had to be like, sorry, I'm actually Audi. You can call me Audi. I also use they, them pronouns. And somebody was like, wait, doesn't that not work with grammar? Because you're one person. And then I continued throughout my interview process with every single person using my dead or given name, to which I then had to correct them and educate and do that process every single part of my final round for this opportunity. And then the last person, which was the head of diversity and inclusion for this organization, was like, thankfully, okay, I'll have somebody. And he said, no, 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 Audie, I got it. I'll say, them told me that. And I was like, it's actually just they, like the way that you would use it in any other sentence. Like, they told me. And he was like, no, 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 no. I got it. I have mad love for my LGBTQ brothers and sisters. And I was like, so I don't identify with any gender. Not women, not men. I'm kind of like neither. Sometimes I'm both. It's really, did you have any questions for me? The recruiter reached out to me after, asking if we could have a follow-up conversation, because the people that were interviewing me felt that they couldn't get enough, actually, anecdotes or information about my experience. So they wanted a follow-up. You all should know I actually don't work at this company. And I told this story to one of my customers, to which they actually said, Audie, I love you as a human, and I totally get it. I understand where you're coming from. But why would we change an entire system, so many systems, for one person? I mean, after all, trans people only represent less than 10% of the population. So why would we do it? And the spoiler alert is that gender inclusivity is for everybody. It's not just for me. When I think about this, right, the problems of sexism, the problems of facing misogyny, homophobia, transphobia too, collectively, they all have misunderstandings about gender and your assumptions about gender. Specifically, they expect you to perform or act in a certain way because of who you are. And when we think about gender inclusivity, I'll talk about it from a specific hiring lens. And this is probably my favorite example. This is a bullet point of a job description. Mind you, every bullet point started like this: he/she. Now, I got this as a screenshot from one of my good friends. She is not trans. She is a director of engineering at a really well-known startup in Seattle. And she sent this to me, and she said, I was so pissed today from my job. I was so frustrated with the lack of communication. I literally went to LinkedIn and searched for other opportunities, and I can't believe I came across this. And I was like, what's wrong with it? You're she. Tell me. And she said, there's no chance in hell I would ever work at a company who didn't think that there were an alternative option besides he or she. And I know that I won't see anybody like you because of this. She goes, I want to work at a company that's actually doing the work, that will learn. I was like, okay, well, we've all done this at some point. We've all said it, thinking that we were going to be more inclusive of the people, right, that we were attracting to these open roles. We included she and he, and we were just describing the opportunity. Nobody likes writing job descriptions, after all. And this point here is that they, instead of using he/she, they could have just said you. They could have talked directly to the person instead of talking about them. Because that's really awkward anyways, right? If I was talking about you to you, you would be like, I'm right here. And this happens all of the time. Now, we're going to talk a lot today about the difference between intention and impact. These 4 different images were actually from different companies' careers page. They all intended to showcase one benefit that they wanted to highlight. They all said the same benefit, and they used 4 different images to describe it. Work-life balance. I'm sorry, but that is a dry salad. He is not happy. I'm like, Do you need dressing? Do you need to step away? Do you need to go to the kitchen for the dressing? There's a lot here. And even too, the second image, that sun is setting. Are you all ordering takeout for dinner? Nobody is going home and eating with their family. I don't see work-life balance in a lot of these images, but they did. And they were using it to communicate that they had work-life balance, not knowing that their impact on all of us was different. And this happens even in the most unintentional and obvious ways. I work at Texty O. Texty O is augmented writing. What that actually means is just having data behind your words, so that way for anything that you write, you get the response you want from the people that you want. Texty O did this analysis of these 8 different tech companies and the language patterns that they use in their publicly available job posts. At the key, you can see the impact of some of the words that they use. Now, the context here is actually important, right? Because I don't believe that the head of employer brand at Amazon is telling people to use the word maniacal in their job posts. And the context of that sentence is actually, we have a maniacal focus on our customers, which in theory is amazing, right? We want somebody who is crazy about our customers. But the impact here is different. When Slack says that they care deeply about their customers, they engage a completely different audience. And the words that we use have impact even when we don't know it. And I'll give you more examples. Let's say you want to hire, and you want somebody to be able to manage. The data in Texty O shows that when you use the phrase manage, you lose people who identify as women. But maybe we'll change it. Maybe we'll say, we want you to lead. And this is what happens to your talent pool. You engage the entire population, opposed to just a subset. And let me be explicit, there are variances to this, dependent on job function, right? If you're in an admin role or in a legal role or in finance, and you use directive language like must, it actually lowers time to fill for those jobs. But that changes for any other job function. And even location, right? The way that we use language, I'm originally born and raised in Chicago, but I spent some time in New York doing employer brand, and now I live in Seattle. How we talk is different. And the data in Texty O proves it. When you say the phrase interpersonal skills in a job description in the state of California, statistically, you'll attract people who identify as women. But that same phrase in Ohio attracts nobody. The truth is that no matter what you do, whether you are making food, whether you are building software or cars or selling pharmaceuticals, no matter what business you are in, you produce more words than anything else. Words fuel everyday business transactions. They are dependent on you hiring somebody. They're dependent on you letting somebody go, giving them a heads up in a performance plan. Words fuel everything. They shape our everyday experiences. I think back to that interview that I had. Maybe if my interview didn't turn from an interview to a Trans 101 training brought to you by yours truly, I would have had a different outcome in working there. And even every day, when people are more intentional, more cautious, more careful about the language that they use, you see it in your office walls. And I know from working at Texty O that people start to think before they speak because they don't want to harm somebody. They don't want to exclude somebody from the conversation because that's not their intention. And even today, I'm standing, trying to make eye contact with every single one of you, and it is very hard. But I'm hoping to connect. I'm hoping that I'm using the right words in the right way to get you excited, to get you more thoughtful, more intentional about everyday words that we use. And I keep thinking to myself, is it working? We're all guessing at what words we're going to use next, and it comes at a big cost. They shape whether or not you get to understand me, you get to connect with me, whether or not you get my story in some way, shape, or form. And especially when we all fundamentally know what it's like to be misunderstood. Everybody, regardless of your identity, has said the phrase, no, that's not what I meant. We've all said that. What I meant to say was, and you'd say it. And this is probably the most heartbreaking part, is that even with the best of intentions, even with the best hope, we fall flat. We don't know. So how can we? How can we be a little bit more deliberate about the language that we use? Well, I'll use Texty O and gender and pronouns as a specific example here. It takes two things. We both have to learn and unlearn. Learning is actually relatively easy, right? If I give you a course, you would be like, got it. But pronouns, for example, we learn at the earliest developmental stages of our brain. When I tell you that I use they, them pronouns, you are literally going back and having to unlearn everything that you've learned up until this point, no matter how old you are. It's a difficult thing. So learning and unlearning, it's both. And you need three things for it to be successful. You have to make it simple and human, and remember compassion. Let's take gender for a specific example, when we're unlearning assumptions about gender. One of my friends did a facilitation on gendered language for a group of middle schoolers. And there was a 7th grader who we were talking about pronouns. And we said, OK, how can you guess somebody's pronoun? This person raised their hand, and they said, you can't. We said, OK, say more. I'm like, well, you can't tell how somebody looks by, or how they identify by how they look. They could be wearing a dress and use he, him. They could be wearing a suit and use she, her. Or they could come in their birthday suit and say nothing. And I think how lucky this person is to grow up in that being their reality in 7th grade. Right? But we'll talk about it here, what this looks like in practice. Now, Texty O started doing this. I was one of the 30th employees, 38th, I think, employee at Texty O. Today, we are over 160 in 2 years. We started doing this when I joined, which was everybody will go around the room in an interview loop and introduce themselves, their name, their pronoun, their title, how long they've been at Texty O. And for the person who's interviewing, tell us a little bit about yourself instead of how long you've been at Texty O. And this is how it looks. We're just going to go around the room, give us your name, your pronoun, he, she, they, z, and I'll use myself as an example. My name's Audie. I use they, them pronouns. And I've been here for about 2 years. This is step 1, right? Keep it simple. 2, of course, is making it human and remembering compassion. It's not enough to just introduce pronouns because we're going to mess it up. Right? We have to tell people what happens when we do. So we say, if you're not familiar with a new pronoun, don't worry about it. It's OK. Just say the original statement, repeat it with the correct pronoun. It takes practice. And that differentiation is so important. Because we learn language so early, it's so embedded in us, where we live, what we do, we have to have compassion. So today, even when you say that you heard me speak, you'll say, I heard Audie. They were telling me about themselves. And if you mess up, because you will, it's okay. You can even go as far to do a language audit in your everyday workplace. Just think, like, the next time that you're in a meeting, how often explicit gendered language comes up. It happens all the time. I hear it. Dude, you should have seen that Game of Thrones episode the other day. It was amazing. Or, hey, guys, can we settle down, guys? Or even emails. Good morning, sir/madam. Hello, boys and girls. When instead, you could just say, good morning. Hello, everybody. Maybe Texas had it right all along, like folks and y'all. Even today, I got on my flight, and the flight attendant was like, thank you for joining us today. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got our Boeing aircraft, and they continued. People who are not trans, non-binary, gender non-conforming, we hear that. As soon as somebody says, ladies and gentlemen, and they say it on every flight, I travel a lot, but nobody else will miss it, right? We notice it, but I promise you, if you were to get onto a flight and you instead said, good morning, everybody, welcome to Boeing aircraft, nobody would be like, oh, they didn't call me a lady today. I'm upset. Alaska, do better. It wouldn't happen, right? But it impacts the people that a lot of these people in this room want to connect with most. I talk to talent acquisition leaders every day, and everybody says, I want a representative workforce. I want a diverse workforce. I want to be able to say that I hired equally and equitably. And that's an incredible intention. But how we use certain words dictates who we hire and how long they stay, fundamentally. So I'll leave you with this. Treat others with grace, because everybody is messy. Humans are fundamentally messy. So the next time you hear somebody say dude, right, in a meeting, the next time you get an email, I'm hoping that every single one of you will think just for a split second about an alternative that you might use, somebody that you might not be including in the conversation. So the future of words is pretty simple. The future of words, they're effective. When I say effective, I mean you know how people will respond to what you said. You communicated effectively. What you meant is what you said. And they're inclusive. This is a byproduct of effective communication. Right? When you're effective with the words that you use, of course you engage the entire population opposed to just a small subset. And if we don't, right, we'll see the businesses that care and put time and compassion and energy, right, to make it real, because it's necessary for our businesses to survive. Because as the workforce becomes more diverse, as we see more people from underrepresented groups get uplifted, we have to take more intentional steps to be able to include them and make spaces that were designed to celebrate them from the very beginning. That's it. Thanks. So I think there's some time for questions. If anybody has questions, comments, reactions, concerns, anything. Yeah, there's a few hands. There's another mic.
Thank you, that was really great. I saw Z. I'm not familiar with that one. Would you mind sharing?
Yeah, absolutely. So Australians created Z, which is amazing. It's the singular version. They created it as an alternative for the folks, the grammar folks who were like, they, but it's plural. You can't use they. Instead, Z is the singular option too. Yeah, thanks for that.
If you had a place to start with an organization that was really old school.
Yeah.
Like really old school. I mean, we're talking like this isn't even on the horizon. Where do you jump in to, break the room open a little bit, and not make everybody really uncomfortable?
That's one of my specialties, making people feel uncomfortable. I think really this is like when I think about the keep it simple and human facet too, is that like having just a base level education about like the people that we want to hire, right? And you could frame it in a few different ways depending on what they really care about. So people that are saying that they want to hire more people from underrepresented groups because it helps their bottom line. Like if you know that is where we are at, then position it to how and who you're talking to, right? That's gonna be very, very different if I'm talking to somebody who, wants to and is eager, right, to like move things along, but just doesn't know how, right? So I think one starts with a base level of education. Of course, like this is what the representation or representative workforce looks like and will look like, right? As more people start not identifying with any genders. You'll look at specific, Gen Z is a perfect example of people opting out altogether, right? And you can use some of the data points around gender and how gender is changing to be able to say like, hey, we can't have our ATS say female, male, or other. We need alternative options, right? We need to be explicit because that means that if we have more people representative of the workforce, of course, then we'll make better products, we'll sell better, we'll do whatever business we're in better. So I would usually start there and also like, I think sharing people's personal experiences, like everybody knows what it's like to be misunderstood fundamentally, like it's human to know that. And I think before I even talk about business, when I talk about things, I talk about myself, right? Being Latinx, being second generation in the United States, like there is something both horrible, like I have a love-hate relationship with words for this exact reason, but saying that there are people that walk in the world, right, that are finally able to have access. They're finally able to step into their power. Like some of the emotional storytelling is usually where I would pivot to try to convince some folks, or at least give a base level understanding, or you can point them to different shows. I know that my parents were like, when I came out to them, they were like, Billions on HBO, they have a they. I'll take it, thank you. Thanks. Yeah, or I don't know.
I guess I have the mic.
Who is, yes.
Thank you, this is fantastic. Question for you around the inclusion and once somebody has come on board. I think so many organizations focus on the interview, and so some of the examples you gave were fantastic, but any recommendations once people have joined or bloopers that we should all be mindful of that we're probably ignorant that we're doing?
Yeah, let me bring up the scroll. No, I think one thing, gendered language is one piece too, and the data behind Texty O shows a ton of different language, like stakeholders doesn't attract folks of color and women, and there's so much data around how people respond to language specifically. I think the first thing before we can, because the hiring process is the hiring process, but once we get in the practice, like at Texty O, everybody, like all hands, no matter who you are, how long you've been at the company, always introduces themselves with their names and their pronouns. And that's how every meeting starts if there's somebody new. So it's become a habit. And it's not on accident, right? That we have like more than 30% of our employees at Texty O that identify in the LGBTQ spectrum, as well as like when I look at my engineering team, for example, they're minority men. which is like bananas to think about, right? But we were intentional, right? We were going to say we're not making assumptions. We're doing it at every level. Team meetings, all hands, signatures, right? Even when we ask for feedback, when we think about response times, how much air time people get or mic time in a meeting, whether or not they're cut off, and we start to give that level of awareness, it's pretty magical to see people step up and be more intentional and say like, hey, actually, no, Sarah wasn't done talking, right? But there's small tweaks every day that you could do, absolutely. I wish I could give you more, but come find me after.
Hi, Adi.
Hi.
Hi. I am in recruitment marketing, and one of my primary goals when I first started with my organization was to work on language and rewriting job postings. And so I'm quite familiar with a lot of Texty O's work, because part of my research involved speaking with someone over there. But now I'm at the point where I'm wondering if, in terms of inclusivity, if there are any advances in language that you could speak about in terms of ability and those differences, or is that
yes, and
other world?
Yes, we have the data to talk about both veteran status and ability. It is not public yet, but will be shortly. So that's what I can lead you with without completely bursting Textio's bubble about. But yeah, there is data to show on, especially when I think of the EEOC data, right? Whether that's ability, nationality, veteran status, et cetera. The data is showing that there is a strong correlation between the words that you use, even structure, and the format that people get it on, right? So of course, if you are not optimizing for spaces that are colorblind friendly, right? How people engage with you changes. Yeah, so I would say stay tuned. I can't give you anything right now, but I will say stay tuned.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. I don't know if there's. I know that somebody was over here.
Hello, hey. Hi. Me. My name is David. I work at the Open Society Foundations. Recently opened an office in Berlin. And we had a diversity and inclusion. I don't have a question, sorry, I have a comment. And so we had a diversity and inclusion project, and a year ago we ran the data on like what kind of talent can we attract with our advertisements. It was not good. It was really not good. So we started using Texty O around a year ago.
No.
We changed the entire, all of the advertisements are completely changed. Now they have a slightly more feminine tone. And this year's data is significantly better.
Yay.
So it's actually working. It's really, and I did not get paid to do this, by the way.
I'm like, we have never met. What is your name?
Yeah, so thank you.
Amazing, thank you. Yeah, congratulations too.
We're going to take one more question.
There was somebody over here can we give her the mic? Or you can.
I work in Europe. MF at the end of the job title. Male/female. Unfortunately, it's a legal requirement here.
Oh.
Any data to support getting rid of MF?
Yeah. Do you use she, her pronouns, by the way? Because I'm going to repeat. Okay. Her question was, in Europe, it's legally required to have MF in job descriptions and a part of the recs. So is there any data to support that has any type of correlation on who you hire? So yes, and I will say that being explicit, so this happens all the time, right? ADA is a perfect example. The American Disabilities Association legally requires you in the state of Washington to have binary bathrooms, both women and men's restrooms, right? And like when we were building our offices, this was a problem. The caveats to this is if you are explicit, right, something like an equal opportunity statement, that is actually not legally required anywhere else outside of the United States. But the data shows that if you are explicit, that you want people, whether that's gender identity, expression, and you go through the different categories, it's 11 days difference in time to fill. As in you engage more qualified people who identify with and by underrepresented groups. So even if you legally have to require it, like the caveat to the bathrooms is that we redesigned the bathroom sign to be able to say, because it has to say women, but at Texty O, we want to make sure that anybody can use that restroom. We just redesigned the bathroom signs to say, even though that this says women, right? Regardless of your gender identity, your expression, anybody is welcome in this restroom, right? So being able to be explicit about the caveats, especially when it comes to legal requirements, hopefully the law will catch up to us, but it does make a difference if you're explicit that this is beyond and for other people, even though we legally have to say MF. But yeah, that's a great question, thank you. Okay, great. Somebody had the mic.
Hi, I have a quick question. So I work in talent experience, so talking about your experience as a candidate and a new hire. And one thing that we've been mindful of, and our organization, which is great, is the pronoun kind of question. And understanding that you don't represent every single person on the planet, but maybe from your research is, I guess it's like, when is the best time to ask that question? Like, is it in an application? Is it communicating about scheduling an interview? That's where I kind of constantly question, like, when is a good time to like reach forward with that question?
Totally. I think the first part is normalizing it. So all of our recruiters at Texty O have pronouns in their signature, and there's actually, I think it's called mypronoun.org. So the link to the actual pronoun itself, you can click on it. So even if it says he or she, you click on it and it'll give you a full rundown of why people are using pronouns and a little bit of education. That's one. So we normalize it saying that we're gonna ask for pronouns if somebody's reaching out or introducing themselves. Step two is that you can configure it within your ATS. We just did that. I know that people are system change averse, but asking for pronouns and not making it mandatory, right? To be able to say, like, this is, if you want to give us your pronouns, give us your pronouns. It'll also give you an awareness of somebody's education, like coming in, and help the hiring manager. Like if somebody doesn't fill out that they don't know pronouns, the hiring manager will be like, the second slide, it's totally okay if you mess up, like, and give them more compassion and education that way. I call it the Texty O bear hug. When people come in and they don't know, and then they get into Texty O, everybody starts becoming a little bit more fluid with it and have more capacity for it. But I would absolutely have it in recruiters, sourcers, signatures, as well in the ATS, so that way you can start tracking it as well.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for that. And I think we are all set out for questions. But if you have any remaining questions, you have comments or things like that, you can find me, of course, on LinkedIn or on Twitter. I'm Audi_Barreto. I'd be happy to help or talk to you all after. So thanks again.